You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards-Nagel, and Taylor Polindo.
Comparison says, be like everyone else, but better.
Comparison is a creativity killer.
Comparison is the thief of happiness.
So this episode, we're talking about comparison is the thief of something in your life. And before we dive into the theories and the education on all of this, all of those quotes are by Brené Brown. She discusses a lot of comparison, and I really like this one section. I feel like encompasses a lot of my misunderstanding of comparison and thinking, oh, I don't do this. But then realizing how quickly comparing things can become very judgmental in your own mind, and you don't know that you're doing it. In this section of chapter 2 of Atlas of the Heart, she says, when we compare, we want to be the best or have the best of our group. The comparison mandate becomes this crushing paradox of fit in and stand out. It's not be yourself and respect others for being authentic. It's fit in but win. I want to swim the same workout as you and beat you at it. And that last sentence, I was like, damn it. I'm doing this way too much in my life, and it is totally sucking happiness from my life.
So fit in and win?
Yeah, and in this chapter, she talks about a workout just to go swim by herself. And all of a sudden, she'll catch herself looking to the right and start racing someone that's not racing her. It's like this comparison of I can
I've totally done this.
I've done this in a yoga class.
This is why I only take fitness classes, because that is how I have to do fitness. Like, I have to compete with someone. That's
It's
the point.
so funny. Yoga? That's hard to do.
You can have better form. You could go them faster. Like you can, or even go slower. That could be harder.
I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this person next to me is holding this pose really strong. I can do that.
The positive, right? That's where this comparison can inspire you to do better, to be better. That's the positive side of comparison, right?
So let's get into the
We're
theories.
going to talk about that.
Now, what we just heard from Brené Brown, our favorite person, is it's not so great. So we'll get to the good side, but we should probably back up the train a little bit and talk about social comparison theory, which is an old theory that we've been around a long time. And it's basically this idea that each of us has a drive to gain an accurate sense of self-evaluation. So we're naturally inclined to evaluate where we're at.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? We stack ourselves up on a bunch of different dimensions against other people to see how that comparison looks. And so the areas that we might identify: attractiveness, wealth, intelligence, success. I'm sure we've never compared ourselves in any of those areas.
Some things really, though, our culture is set up that way. The higher academics, even jobs, it's structured to compare you to your peers.
So that reminds me of a story. I was traveling one time. I was in Dublin, Ireland, and I went to Trinity University, and we did a tour, and they said, have you heard about our commencement ceremonies? And I said, I had not. And they said, yeah, you line up in order. And the last guy had the lowest grades. Or gal, right? And they take up a collection of money and they give it to the last person. But at least you end up with money. But clearly you're the bottom.
So you don't want to be second to the last at that school, because you get nothing and you're at the end.
Yeah, I thought in the United States people would be sued for that. Like, how dare you make me 25th?
Yeah.
Interesting. Beautiful location, though. There's no C's get degrees at that college.
Well, C's do get degrees, but C is for comparison. So one of the things in theory that to talk about is this idea of upward and downward comparison. Help us out, Mare. What's upward?
I love the visuals of these things. It just helps me, if you're like me, that you need to see it like the upward arrow, downward arrow. Upward social comparison focuses on this desire to improve your current status or just your level of ability where you're at, right? So this could be something like you're doing a simple 5K, right? Or you're marking off something on a fitness goal, and you compare yourself to others to give you that drive to push harder, work harder. And that's to improve yourself, right? It's an upward movement. I want to better myself in X, upward.
This sounds good, right?
I think so. I think it can get into getting out of your lane, which we'll talk about, but Brené Brown talks a lot about. I think it's focus on improving yourself. I struggle with it because I want that growth. I want to be like X, so I'm going to look to them and I'm going to work on myself to get close to that goal. But I think it also could be an over distraction and you can use it in not a positive way, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there's downward social comparison. We're comparing ourselves to people we think are worse off than us. It makes us like on a high horse,
like
if
arrogant?
you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're looking down.
You think you're better than someone else?
I think so. I think it's a way of
Or
going
you're
like,
just
oh,
more skilled, maybe?
Well, on whatever the dimension you're comparing, probably yes.
Okay.
If you're comparing attractiveness, you probably think you're more attractive. Or if you're comparing whatever dimension you're on, I would think is how you make it.
I think my brain immediately went to these like awful TLC reality shows of people like just in complete dysfunction. And like my thrill for watching them sometimes is probably because I'm like, I feel a lot better about myself after watching.
I'm not like those people. So yeah, I think there's some arrogance tied up in there and judgment probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So essentially this social comparison though, right? It's like an internal
Drive?
Yeah. To constantly like, you're like measuring up or evaluating yourself against or compared to someone else or something else.
Yeah.
I see it as a good thing of, oh, like the upward, be better. I feel like it just gets bad so fast.
Because you're basically looking down on someone and then saying, I'm not as bad as those people. Which is not really the headspace we're all going for right there.
Even
I'm
the
not
upward.
as bad as you.
Yeah, but even the upward. Okay, so then I'm concentrating on constantly never feeling like I'm enough or I've never measured up enough. I like the drive. I don't want to take that away from this because I know that I will be like that in my life and I'm okay with it to an extent. But I think I've seen how sometimes in my life it's made me feel like a failure instead of driven me positively.
I think it's really interesting how we tend towards these comparisons so quickly and so easily, and we believe that our perception is the accurate thing. Or we associate you with maybe you're in that group, so we believe you're in that group. I had this funny thing happen to me years ago. I was practicing with a team that I was the coach of, but I was 2 levels higher than this team in a tennis ability, but I was coaching. And they were short a player on this other competitive team. So somebody said, maybe Pamela will come and play. And they were like, okay, because they thought I was on that low level team and wasn't any good. So they said, sure, we'll wait the whole match if she'll come because she's practicing with this lower level team. They thought they had me completely figured out. And in the first set, they were completely shocked.
And I
Not
love
because
that
I was
for
winning
you,
every
though.
point, but they had decided so much about me that I was less than them, and that was going to be perfect for their great day playing tennis. And some of my friends saw this unfolding, and they were like, this is going to be fun. So it was fun. It was a lovely day.
I just love that.
I'm thinking that the upward is in improving. You compare it as an inspiration to you, and the downward is like, if you want to spin it positive, it gives you confidence and you can assess like, oh, I'm doing all right because look, I'm not there. But why it's a thief of joy is because then your whole identity is now based on someone else, their spectrum of success or whatever it is you're comparing, and rather come up with your own goals, come up with your own spectrum of what is success to you. And then you just check it against yourself. Am I doing the goals I set out for myself? Am I the kind person I want to be? Am I the level of attractiveness I want to be? Am I whatever you want to do? Then maybe that is why we wouldn't have a thief of joy if you could just compare it to yourself versus other people.
Our children, when they were small, did a swim team. And they had this incredible coach. He was actually an Olympic coach for a different sport, but he was a great swim coach as well. And he would sit down these kids of ours, and they were small, like 6, 8, and 10. They were young. And he would always say, kids, you know the race is in your lane. I don't want any of you looking at the scoreboard, and I don't want any of you looking around. The more you look around, the more you stop swimming. And there's no point. The comparison never pays off, right? Because you do the comparison, and that you're not going as fast as everybody, or you were, but now that you looked, there you are, right? And so I used to say to my kids, they used to have a thing called the no breather, which is where you go a long way without taking a breath. And I used to say, hey, kids, no lookers. Forget the breath. No looking around. And my kids were famous lookers. We talked a lot about why are you comparing yourself so much to the next person and not trying to be better in your lane.
But that's understandable, and especially things like school, sports, work, because the whole structure is based on you're going to have a boss, you're going to have first place, you're going to have the top of the class.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, oh, well, just focus on yourself when our whole structure, the system is set up to reward number one.
Yeah, great point.
But life isn't. So happiness, your relationships, your actual life isn't set up that way, but we treat it as if it is. The comparison I feel like that I do a lot is to an old self. And I'm like, man, I'm not as fit as I used to be. Oh, I'm not as good of a friend because I don't have the time as much to dedicate to that. My house isn't as clean anymore. I'll compare things to an old self that I feel like at this point in life, I just need to let go. And I could see throughout life as I age, that could always be the case.
So
Just
are those
always be looking
comparisons
back.
always negative?
Yes.
'Cause I would you weren't as good of a mother.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just saying I've seen you develop into that role from not knowing your husband.
Exactly. See, I love that reframe. Yeah, that's.
No, but I think about it, even becoming a mother from child 1 to child 3.
Oh yeah.
Are we allowed to say that?
Yeah. Baby number
There's
3
children
here.
everywhere. From 1 to 3, think about the growth, though.
Yeah.
Old self, new. Yes, I guess you could do it negatively, but it doesn't have to always be negatively.
Yeah, I like that glass half full growth mindset, positive reframe. Throw it all
Carol
in there.
Dweck in here.
Okay. The other thing I thought about when I was compared to people as a child, what it taught me was not really to be better. It really just taught me to resent that other person, resent their accomplishment. So I wasn't excited for them because I was just like, oh, this is going to get thrown in my face. So look what they did. And I wasn't happy for people's successes. And I just would rather resent them for it.
You're talking about some families, and I don't know if that was my family of origin, but some families put up the accomplishment of one child and the other children potentially are forced into that comparison. And they don't pick it. They're just jammed down their throat. Look what so-and-so did.
Yeah. Or they could even self-inflict that comparison, just if you have a sibling who stands out in a lot of ways.
Or even the reverse.
but
Like you have a sibling that is making poor choices.
Yeah.
I've heard this one where like, oh,
they get a lot
you're
of
sounding
attention
like
for it.
so-and-so. And you're like, oh, I don't want to be like them. I know the problems they give you. I don't want to be like that.
Yeah. I was just thinking about how we had the Olympics. If you have an Olympian in your family, you're probably like, I'm not super athletic.
Yeah.
Even though you might be very athletic, right? But you're like, except for my sister's an Olympian. So there's that.
Yeah.
I'll say that the two that stuck out for me the most was I like to lie to myself and say that I don't compare myself to people on social media. But I think I definitely have done that, whether it's even something I'm like embarrassed to even say because it seems so petty. Oh, it's fine. This is how fast I got back in shape after I had my kid.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's a big one.
And I remember it took me longer the first time than that. And being a physical person and really active, that was super frustrating. So trying to slow down, not look at things like that, and give myself a little more humanity this go around at it is, I think I'm kidding myself though if it doesn't affect me. Like it's not in my head. So
that's funny. Because when you said that, I thought to myself, I think I treat social media like that as well, where I think, oh, I'm sure it's bad for other people, but I don't maybe go on it as much or take as much stock in it. But I would say it's naive to say it doesn't influence you.
I think that's exactly how I felt getting ready for this episode. I'm sure probably some people, I stay off it less than most, making a comparison about that in itself, which is hilarious.
I'm not as bad as those bad people.
I know, but that's hilarious that I was making a comparison about it not affecting me.
Yeah.
And then so it definitely does. So just being honest about that.
Good. That motherhood category you're talking about, that's a massive one. You could compare all kinds of things in the motherhood category.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard.
I think as mothers, there are times when we feel that the children are an extension of us. I'm not saying we always feel like that, but there are times where we feel like this is representing me or my mothering, and that puts it out there as something that is pretty vulnerable because it's like, oh, if you act like a weirdo right now, then, or
For sure, it's
disobedient or
scary.
whatever, makes
Yeah.
me look bad.
Yeah. And I think the other one I thought of is myself being young, married, divorced, going back into that part of the world. I remember thinking I was focusing so much on these people have success. They did it. How come I couldn't do it? Or comparing what will the next person think of me that wants to have a relationship with me if I've had this huge thing fail. And realizing that not focusing on my lane, not focusing on my own life and my own improvement caused me to, I think, lose some happiness at the time in my life because I was so worried about the comparison of or what other people were seeing about me and making those judgments.
Knowing the comparison would be made and you would potentially be the downside, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is the
that I would be on the receiving side of that downward.
Yeah.
That yes.
Yeah.
100%. And now,
and that's also because you're in your 20s, right? So
oh yeah,
there's
sure.
social expectations and all kinds of garbage, right?
And that doesn't even have to go straight from marriage to divorce. It's this failed relationship. You have a long-standing relationship with a boyfriend, girlfriend, and you work hard at it, and then it fails. And I am on the receiving end yet again of people saying, just that feeling that's out there. And I think it's the failure, but it's a comparison that you're the failing thing that people think of when they compare themselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm over it now.
That's really insightful. So how do you get out of that? How did you get out of that? You said
love
stay in your lane.
I love these strategies that we're going to talk about. But yeah, I think just focus that for me, that one in particular, is stay in your lane is the best way to put it. It's just focusing on your own work, your own efforts, right? And finding leads you to the most joy and success in yourself, not compared to that person next to you. Because even for example of me thinking, oh, these people have a successful relationship. Do you really know? Are you behind closed doors with them or whatever? I know we do know some people, but not thinking in that direction.
You reminded me of, we talked about the swimming example. And I remember distinctly during that time period where I had a friend who brought her son into our swim program, and he was just learning to swim as well. He wasn't gifted at swimming. And she said, I don't know if he can get there, but I'm going to just see. But his great superpower was he never noticed that everyone was better than him. He didn't seem to notice. And so there were times where we would watch and we'd be like, you dropped 6 seconds off your time, some of these strides. And later he ended up swimming competitively in college.
Whoa.
And we were there when he was 8 or whatever, and he was trying to do it. But to be fair to this idea that Brené Brown says it steals your joy, he had the joy when he dropped the 6 seconds occasionally, or the seconds. I remember seeing him and going, that is unbelievable that he's still doing that. And then to watch him go all the way on to swim in college is something else, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. That's a great example. Taylor, I think you were going to share that you learned about a strategy.
It's one of the suggested strategies, which is to practice gratitude. But I was talking to my cousin because I know she does this daily. And she lists, what's 3 things you're grateful for? But when I was talking to her, she said, not just what you have. Don't just be grateful for what you have, but who you have to love. And so I thought that was really impactful because a lot of times we assess what we have in life and, oh, I need to be grateful for these things. But rather, what's really more important, I think, is who is in your life that you get to love, not even who gets to love you. Oh, I'm so grateful I have all these people who love me. But rather, who do you get to pour out to? Who do you love? And I just shut me up and I was like, damn, she's right.
Compare it again, that upward comparison. She's so good at that. Damn it.
She said, but what a more beautiful thing that I get to love someone or be loved. It's so much more beautiful to love someone or more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately the goal here, I think, is to be happier. We don't want to steal the joy. We want to be happier. So this is a way to do that.
We've talked a little bit about social media. I think one strategy we could talk to that's rather obvious is pick your strategy intentionally versus accidentally defaulting into things that aren't good for you. I heard you just say that's a very intentional strategy to say, I'm focusing on the people I get to love and I'm focusing on things I'm grateful for. And I think the alternative to that is saying, oh, social media is not going to affect me and I'm just going to default. And I think we default probably, social media has got us there to be really quickly going into the downward and not thinking maybe we have as beautiful of a sunset or as great of as a vacation, or we don't have the beautiful family they have, or whatever. It could be anything. It's so many things. And I think there's a lot of defaulting out there.
And I'll just say, as someone who practices Instagram and social media breaks, I have tangible evidence of how my life is different when I take a break from social media. I'm a much happier person.
Yeah.
What I notice is I'm trying to learn stuff and I just feel, oh, I'm doing such a bad job because I'm not doing all of these things.
Okay. So what kind of breaks do you take from social media? Are they like a day or a week? Do you take long periods or hours?
I take months at a time. I'll deactivate. Yeah. Oh yeah. I just came back to announce that I had baby number 3, and I'll have noticed my mind is going negative. So I'm about to leave again.
Yeah, no, I love those.
Also,
I thought I
knew
with
this about you.
A friend of mine will do it for like at least a week up to a month.
Okay.
It's a nice thing to do.
And you get a lot of time back.
More sleep. I was going to focus back on something you said, Dr. K, about like it's this accidental thing we fall into, this mindset of comparing. How do I stop doing that? How do I stop doing that? Researchers have said it's something that you just fall into. You don't even realize you're not even totally aware you're doing it. But to be honest with ourselves, that it can happen, and to refocus by doing things like staying in your lane, focusing on your gratitude, or even I like one of the researchers we learned about said basically to recognize it takes up your time, valuable time. And I like that. Yeah. It's like time is money, or your time is valuable. To know that when you allow your mind to continue to fall into this, instead of stopping it where it's at, you're giving up that free time for this thing that's not serving you anyway, or not making you happier.
It's renting your upstairs for free, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a really good point. Yeah, it's just free real estate in your head that's just taking away your happiness.
Then it comes down to this decision of behavioral change, I think, centers around a couple of notions. One is awareness, and then intentionality out of that awareness.
Yeah.
So I think we have to just become aware of the upward, aware of the downward, aware of how much am I doing this? And then that's the awareness piece. And then the second is the intentionality, and saying, what are the behavioral changes I would like to do, whether that's leaving social media or refocusing mindset or staying in your lane a little bit more. You're going to say something,
5 minutes a day doing gratitude, like pick something practical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that, but I want to challenge it ever so slightly, because Brené Brown's research tells us that the direction of the comparison, upward or downward, doesn't guarantee your outcome. That means if you think, oh, I'm focusing upward comparing because I'm improving myself, so that way it's positive. It doesn't guarantee that. It could still make you feel worthless at the end of it and take away your joy. If your focus is downward, it makes you think, oh, it makes me feel better about myself. It doesn't guarantee that. It might depress you, that someone you love is worse off than you. I love this subject for the three of us because all of us are a bit competitive. And I like that energy, but I love that the research says whether you think you're directing yourself to improve yourself or because you're better than and you're an entitled high horser, it doesn't guarantee your feelings about it. It's still sucking away your joy at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's good.
So anyway, I like challenging you. You challenge me a lot. You gotta get it sometimes.
Are we getting into the judgment side of this?
What are your thoughts?
Sometimes we'll look at someone, a mom, and think, wow, she has a full face of makeup on and she is hair blown out, styled. That's a lot of time. And then I'll put my judgment on it. She should have done something more meaningful with her time.
She should have spent more time with her child who's screaming.
And coming to this place of what's good for them maybe is just not good for me, but it's good for them and that's fine. But I don't know. Why do I go so judgy about it? And I'm like, oh, good for her. She's feeling good about herself. And I've been trying to practice this.
Yeah.
And not turn it towards, oh, you're such a sack of potatoes. Can you just put an underwire bra on once this week and lift those things up?
Yeah.
I judge her negatively, but then I turn it back on myself and judge myself. Oh, I should be doing more. I should, whatever it is. They said it's normal that we all compare. Yeah. That's like a self-assessment thing. Is it bad? What's wrong with me?
No,
I don't think I think it's a normal tendency.
Oh,
but I think we have to figure out what it is we're actually doing. So Because if as soon as it turns into you're not as good as me, that's not really self-evaluation any longer because there's no self in there.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a break almost where you do the comparison. It's like a human reaction. We don't have to beat ourselves up so hard for it. But like we fall into it. And it's okay. What we can do is choose what we do with that. Move into the thought process of what if that's what she needed today and that works well for her and it's not harmful, or let that just be. What we can do is choose to not say in our minds, she should have X. It's like what you tell us all the time, Dr. K. Don't shit on yourself. Don't shit on other people. Maybe the comparison happens and the judgment is your choice and how you decide to move through it.
Yeah, but I judge them and then I flip it back to myself is typically how it ends. Is then I'm like, oh, you can't, just a bun again, huh? Messy bun again. That's what we're doing today.
Remember, too, that according to social comparison theory, the natural tendency to evaluate self. And here we're getting distracted by evaluating other. And we might even stay there and just be like, wow, I can't believe her. How would you ever do that? Wow.
Sometimes it's positive. Like, damn, good for them. I'm not just a rude bitch all the time.
Yeah.
That sentiment out there.
No.
There's just fragments of it occasionally.
But I think to the extent that self-evaluation, that's a natural thing. But I think we could have it be the gateway to a lot of judgmental attitudes.
Yeah.
And what I would say from teaching conflict resolution, that's not going to help anything.
Yes.
And the other part is you don't know the story. She could have had a job interview before going to the playground.
Yeah.
And she had to dress up for it because she has no money and she's trying to make it on her own. You have no idea what the backstory is.
Yeah.
So we look at people and we're like, wow, I wouldn't wear that thing or whatever. But you don't know what happened today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's probably a pretty interesting part of it. I like to take advantage of comparison when it comes to my siblings. So I've done this for years. Anytime my parents would give us a gift, I would always pretend that it was more than them. So I'm the youngest, the favorite.
Wow. I was going to say, wow. This is revelation
My
moment.
parents would give us all a card, right? And maybe there'd be a $50 gift card in there or something. And I always would open it up as fast as I could. And I'd say, 1,000's too much. And my siblings would both look at me like, what? And I would go, just kidding. But you know what? They're so easy. They just looked at me, did it every time.
Gosh.
It didn't matter. You know, that sibling expectation, it's going to be even. Did it to them all the time for decades. It was pretty
they
great.
have a story in their head that they believe that Pamela gets more or is the favorite or because they really believe that, right?
Yeah. So I'm playing off that youngest child thing. And all you youngest out there, I love you. Love you. Let's go. Stop when you get it right. That's right, Mom and Dad.
I'll take the forgotten middle just real hard.
Oh, shoot. We forgot to say a requirement to be on the podcast is you have to be a youngest and competitive. Dang it.
Yes, I'm out.
Sorry, Mayor.
Like, I was the youngest for a while. Does it count? My family? I don't know. Yeah,
that's true. Anyway, it is fun to play with people who expect things to be fair, and I always really did enjoy taking advantage of my siblings. Sorry, siblings.
That's so funny.
You're not sorry.
Not totally sorry.
She's like, not totally. Good night. What's funny, we didn't bring up the one famous quote about comparison, which is the grass is always greener.
I feel like the people I see live their life that way, and they're just never happy. Nothing is ever, they're never satisfied. Nothing's good enough. And it's just, I feel sad for them.
Interesting. So wait, you just made a point. So the people that you see constantly living in their comparison and not resisting, not going to the strategy, don't even seem as happy of people.
No, because no matter what it is, they'll always feel that the other side of the coin, the better version than what they have. So they are just never satisfied in life. I see that with some close people in my life. And so it's something I think about often. It doesn't matter because they would not be happy regardless of the outcome.
It's really interesting. I think that's a really good thing to leave us with, that if you see the people in your life that have more joy and happiness, you see that they're focused on their own self more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.